April 14th, 1945, near Weimar, Germany. The rain has been falling all morning. Not the cleansing kind. The kind that turns roads into rivers and men into silhouettes. The kind that makes everything smell of diesel and wet wool and something else. Something final. A jeep crawled through the mud, its tires spinning uselessly every few hundred yards. In the back sat a man in a soaked German officer's coat. He hadn't slept in 3 days. His name was Fritz Bayerlein, and 24 hours earlier, he had been one of the most feared military minds in the Third Reich. Bayerlein was no ordinary general. He had been Erwin Rommel's chief of staff in North Africa, the Desert Fox's right hand, the man who helped orchestrate the blitzkrieg that made the British 8th Army bleed across 1,000 miles of sand. He had stared down Montgomery, but now he was a prisoner. His Panzer Lehr division, the elite armored unit he had been given command of, was ash and twisted metal somewhere behind him in the Ruhr pocket. The men who weren't dead had surrendered. The Reich had maybe 2 weeks left to breathe, and Fritz Bayerlein, Lieutenant General, Knight's Cross recipient, veteran of 2 fronts and 3 campaigns, was being driven through the German mud to meet the one man he had spent years trying to kill. The farmhouse appeared through the rain like something out of a ghost story. 2 stories. Stone, a single chimney pushing smoke into the gray. American MPs flanked the entrance, their rain-slicked ponchos gleaming under a single bare bulb. Bayerlein was pulled from the jeep. His boot sank 2 inches into the mud. No one spoke. Inside, the air was warm. A fireplace cracked. Maps covered every wall, and in the center of the room, behind a heavy oak table, sat a man Bayerlein recognized instantly. The polished helmet, the riding crop, the ivory-handled revolvers. George S. Patton.
Americans showed their gratitude. In General Pershing's words, it didn't hurt America to have a general so
Bayerlein
bold
snapped to attention.
that he was dangerous.
Old habits, even soaked, even defeated, even now. Patton didn't look up immediately. He let the silence stretch. 5 seconds. 10. Then he gestured to a chair. Sit down, General. Not prisoner, not Kraut. General. Bayerlein sat. Patton poured 2 glasses of whiskey, slid one across the table. Bayerlein stared at it. In the past 72 hours, he had eaten almost nothing. Slept almost nothing. His hands were still trembling not from cold, but from the relentless Allied air assault that had preceded his capture. The Jabos, the fighter bombers, they had not stopped for 3 days. Patton noticed. Rough few days? Bayerlein met his eyes. You could say that. What followed was not an interrogation. It was something stranger. Something almost like 2 professionals talking shop. Patton asked about North Africa. Then the conversation shifted. Patton leaned back. The firelight caught the stars on his collar. 4 of them. Full general. Tell me about Rommel. Bayerlein set down his glass. What could he say? Rommel was dead. Not in battle. Poisoned. Forced to take cyanide by the regime he had served. Bayerlein had attended the state funeral. Had watched the massive swastika-draped coffin roll through the streets of Ulm. Had known, even then, what really happened. He was the finest commander I ever served, Bayerlein said quietly. Patton nodded slowly. I read his book, Infantry Attacks. Studied it before I ever faced him. There's a pause. They murdered him, didn't they? Bayerlein said nothing. The fire popped. A log shifted. Patton stood up, walked to the window. The rain was still coming down. You know what I don't understand, Bayerlein? He turned. You're a brilliant soldier. Rommel was a brilliant soldier. Guderian, von Manstein, some of the finest tactical minds in modern history, and you threw it all away. Bayerlein stiffened. You backed a lunatic, Patton said. No anger, just bewilderment. You took your genius and you strapped it to a cause that burned Europe to the ground. For what? For a failed painter who thought he was a prophet? Bayerlein opened his mouth, closed it. History will determine that, he finally said. Patton shook his head. History already has. That line hung in the air. Because here's the thing about this moment. April 14th, 1945. That makes it so extraordinary. Patton wasn't gloating. This wasn't a victory speech. This wasn't the conquering hero grinding his boot into a defeated enemy. Patton had spent his entire adult life preparing for war. He believed, genuinely, almost mystically, that he had been born for this. And now at the apex of his powers, with the Third Army having just executed the most stunning relief operation in military history at Bastogne, with his tanks having crossed Europe faster than any army in human history, he was looking at Fritz Bayerlein and seeing a mirror. Two career soldiers. Two men who had dedicated their existence to the art of combat. One on the right side of history, one on the wrong side. And the difference between them wasn't talent, wasn't courage, wasn't even moral clarity, at least not in the moment. The difference was luck, geography, birth. And that terrified Patton more than any bullet ever could. Bayerlein broke the silence. I served my country. Patton's expression didn't change. So did I. The difference is my country deserved it. The German general's jaw tightened. For the first time since entering that room, something flickered behind his eyes. Not anger, not even defiance. Shame. I have nothing left to defend, Bayerlein said. His voice cracked on the final word. The Germany I fought for, if it ever existed, is gone. Patton watched him for a long moment. No, he said, quietly. It's not. Bayerlein looked up. It's just going to look different now. April 14th, 1945, near Weimar, Germany. The rain had stopped. Bayerlein was led back outside. The sky was still gray, but there was light breaking through in the west, somewhere beyond the clouds. The sun was setting on the Third Reich. He climbed back into the jeep. The mud had thickened. The diesel smell remained. But something had shifted. Patton hadn't broken him, hadn't even tried. What Patton had done was worse. He had made Fritz Bayerlein understand, truly understand, that everything he had done, every sacrifice, every fallen comrade, every sleepless night in the North African desert and the frozen Ardennes and the burning ruins of Normandy, it had all been in service of something that was always going to end here, in a muddy field, in the rain, in defeat. Bayerlein would survive the war. He would spend 2 years in captivity. He would eventually be released and go to write military history, contribute to the U.S. Army's historical division, and live quietly until 1970. Patton would be dead within 8 months. Not from a German bullet, from a car accident on a quiet road near Mannheim. A jeep collision, of all things. The man who had conquered Sicily, who had slapped 2 soldiers and nearly ended his career, who had raced across Europe and looked a Nazi general in the eye and told him the truth about his own life. Killed by a truck at low speed on a Sunday afternoon. History doesn't do poetry. It does irony. But that night, April 14th, 1945, Patton sat alone in the farmhouse long after Bayerlein had gone. One of his aides found him still at the table, the whiskey bottle half empty, staring at the fire. Everything all right, sir? Patton didn't answer for a long time. You know what Bayerlein said to me right before he left? No, sir. He said, you would have made a hell of a German. The aide waited. And you know what I realized? Patton said. I couldn't tell if it was a compliment. He drained his glass. And I couldn't tell if I wanted it to be. Reality had finally arrived. Not just for Fritz Bayerlein, not just for the crumbling Reich, but for George Patton, the man who believed he was born for glory, who chased it across 2 continents, who found it and held it and discovered, in a quiet farmhouse in the German countryside, that glory has a shadow. And that shadow looks exactly like the man sitting across from you. If you enjoyed this, feel free to like and subscribe.